they took a group of high schoolers and asked them how much they would need to get paid in order to go off social media. And they came up with, I can't actually remember what the amount was. It was a way lower number than I would have ever expected. Then they asked them, okay, how about if everyone else in your school or in your social group was getting off social media? Then how much would you need to get paid? And they said nothing. I would get off immediately, which to me is just like really disturbing. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're gonna dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Today, I have an episode for you that is very personal. And while it is related for sure to the greater work that we do here around helping people heal their relationship with time and money, it is adjacent to that. And it's about kids and phones. So I have been somebody who has been very boundaried about my kids and screen times since day one. I've done a ton of research about EMFs. One of the things we do as a family is we turn off our Wi-Fi at night. We even turn off the electricity on the breaker in the kids' rooms. I mean, I can be, I'm like, couldn't hurt, might help. So we do a lot to kind of calm down the energetic field in our home, to protect our bodies, to allow our bodies to repair at night, to keep our nervous systems calm. And I've been about that since day one. But recently I read an article in The Atlantic about the great rewiring of childhood that was based on Jonathan Haight's book, his new book, which I'm now not remembering the name of, but Samantha, perhaps you can help me of what the new book is called. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, but this new book, I think, is called The Anxious Generation, but we'll get that in a minute. And I wanted to talk about it on the podcast because this is something I think about as a mother all the time. And because our community are grownups who are working on healing their nervous systems and rewiring their brains and bodies to have neural patterning that is healthy, that is serving them, I think about going upstream. And upstream is childhood. And upstream, we have a melding of technology and children's brains that is unprecedented. And we're starting to have the data to show that the melding is not working. And I want to not only protect my kids and ensure their mental and nervous system development is like positive and healthy and for their resilience and robustness, but I am the kind of person who, if I'm thinking about something and I'm doing something, I'm going to share it with our community. So that's what today's episode is about. Samantha, do you have the title of that book? The Anxious Generation. See, I actually had that in my brain. Amazing. But the article was in The Atlantic. I sent it to so many people when I read it. You can actually listen to it in podcast form, which I really enjoyed. And even if you don't want to get a subscription to The Atlantic, it is absolutely worth signing up for a free trial so you can get full access to the article. And then, of course, you can set a reminder to cancel. So my desire is to have people in our world who are as connected to their personal power and connected to source with a capital S as possible. And what I'm noticing in my own experience anecdotally, and then also in the data that I'm reading, is that kids who are on screens, specifically phones, and even more specifically social media, although I'll get into all those different permutations, are being wired, their brains and nervous systems are being wired to be disconnected from their personal power, to be disconnected from source. And I think we're going to have a lot more cleanup to do in the future years than is necessary if we were to get ahead of this as parents now. I will be fully transparent. One of the reasons I'm doing this episode is because it is my desire, it is my dream to find a community that has everyone agreeing to not give their kids phones until high school and to not be on social not have their kids be on social media until 16 at the very earliest. But quite frankly, I hope by then with my children, it will have shifted and maybe won't even be a thing. And so I'm putting this out there because if you know of communities like that, let's be in conversation together. I'm going to follow up with all of that at the end of the episode. First, I want to talk about the problem. The problem is that, as Jonathan Haight talks about it, there has been a great rewiring of childhood, whereas kids used to play outside unattended and be, just fully with each other in nature, playing around with calculated risk and just like kind of learning how to be in the world and playing and being in their bodies physically. Now kids are constantly supervised. They're not able to be outside on their own. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And, Haight gets into all of the data if you want to dig into it, which I do recommend going on that journey and reading about it. But the other thing is that kids are on screens all the time, and they are increasingly losing their ability to have meaningful social connection. And that is changing their brains. And what we know from the data is that specifically being on social media for kids leads to unbelievably high mental health issues. So one stat says that if a adolescent is on social media 3+ hours a day, they have double the risk of anxiety and depression. And the average amount that an adolescent is on social media a day is 4.8 hours. Now, the way our culture is that kids get taken in to the doctor and then they get a prescription for their anxiety or their depression. But I believe in going further upstream and really asking, why are these rates of mental health issues so high? Is there a way that we could prevent this? Is there a way that we could repair this? Now, my kids are 6 and 8, so I'm not this is not imminent, but at the same time, the average age that children are given phones is the age of 10. And I have a daughter who's going to be turning 9 in September. I also live in a city that, for better or for worse, is fairly, and I don't know how much of this is regional, and Mike assures me that this is the case everywhere, but Miami as a city is very visually focused. And, there's a lot of influencer culture, and there's parents at school who are influencers, and there's kids in Penelope's class who already have social media accounts, and she just finished 2nd grade. And I'll be perfectly honest, I find it super disturbing. And what we know is that the mental health stats, the issue with anxiety and depression is way worse in girls. We know that social media just absolutely plummets levels of confidence, levels of being able to be present, levels of real meaningful social connection. And the tricky thing with phones and specifically social media is that it is the one tool, or I'll just call it thing. It is the one thing that unlike cigarettes, unlike anything else that we would deem detrimental to our health, you can just choose not to smoke cigarettes. right? Like you can just choose not to smoke, and sure, there's peer pressure and whatever. But even in 1997, which was the peak of teenage smoking, it was 37% of high schoolers smoked in 1997, which is like astounding to me as a side note. But anyway, but 2/3 of kids weren't smoking. So it was easy just to not do it. When it comes to social media, a kid, an adolescent, is harmed whether they're on it, because we absolutely have the data to prove that since 2012 specifically, 2010, 2012, things really shifted with our mental health data. And Haight says that he thinks it has to do with the iPhone getting the forward-facing camera and all of a sudden selfie culture becoming a thing. And then also the way that social media really took off in 2012, 2013, specifically with Instagram. And then I'm not sure when Snapchat and TikTok came along. But for girls especially, there is this tendency to be, whether because it's how we are or whether it's because of how we're conditioned, I don't know. But we are more conditioned to be externally oriented and looking outside ourselves for, am I okay? And looking for that external validation, and adding social media into a brain that is not developed and will not be fully formed until the early to mid 20s, like your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that gives you the ability to override addictive behavior and override dopamine circuitry that would have you just like sit in front of a slot machine and pull that lever, all day, all night. If you have a brain that is undeveloped, you can't set a proper boundary around something that is designed to keep you addicted and distracted and disconnected from your personal power, disconnected from your ability to make informed, responsive choices. Our personal power is our ability to have agency. It is our ability to have conscious choice. It is our ability to take what is inside us and be able to create in the external world. And when we have substances and then also technology that's literally designed to work with the dopamine circuitry that makes us wanting at all times. Dopamine circuitry in the brain is the wanting circuitry. It's not the liking circuitry, which is a whole other conversation. There's a wonderful book called The Molecules of More. You can read more about that. But it's fascinating the way our brains are set up. There's a whole different series of wiring that has us wanting things than the series of wiring that has us liking things, which means that social media and the constant feeling of like, ooh, I'm now posting a picture and adjusting it and then addicted to seeing, did that person like it? Did that person like it? How many comments did I get? Da, 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 da. If you add that into middle school and high school, which is already like a really intense time with unformed brains, I don't have to tell you what happens. We have the data that happens. We get a huge spike in eating disorders, a huge spike in all sorts of mental health issues, not to mention the safety issues of just like kids being on the internet and a whole other thing. The stories I've heard are fairly disturbing, but I'm not going to get into that today. We can use our own imaginations about how scary it is to just like have children on the internet without any supervision or boundaries. So the thing is, I was talking about smoking and how, even at the height of cigarettes, 2/3 of kids didn't smoke. So you could just like not smoke. With phones and the interconnectivity and specifically social media, kids are harmed whether they're on it, but they're also harmed when they're not. And that to me is really scary, right? Like, yes, if you are hanging around a smoker, you get secondhand smoke. Yeah, you're harmed even if you're not smoking personally. But like, it's not as dark as like, there are serious consequences of feeling disconnected socially when you are not, if your parents are saying, no, you can't do this, or you are choosing to not be participating because you are missing out on the very like nature of the social thread of the web of your community. So you're missing out and you are ostracized, like completely disconnected from what's happening in the group chat, completely disconnected from, oh, that reel or that meme that everyone else is talking about and laughing about. And then if you're on it, we know the mental health outcomes are just bad, 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 bad. So in case you hadn't been aware that these conversations are going on, this is a timely conversation. I heard that now Joanna Gaines has been all over the place talking about it. Who's the one who's on the Today Show? The Jenna Bush, and Hoda Kotb. So they're all like, it's out there in a big way. It's really interesting that actually just yesterday, at the time of recording of this episode, it was reported that the U.S. Surgeon General is now making a statement that he is wanting to have a warning label on social media for adolescents that says it is a huge mental health risk, similar to the warning label that was put on cigarettes in, I don't know what year. So this is a timely conversation. And I think that we can all, if you are a parent, if you're a parent of a young kid, or even if you're a parent of an adolescent, I think we can all contribute in meaningful ways to be part of changing the social landscape so that it is not so difficult to opt out. Because this was fascinating. In the article in The Atlantic, Jonathan Haight talked about that they took a group of high schoolers and asked them how much they would need to get paid in order to go off social media. And they came up with, I can't actually remember what the amount was. It was a way lower number than I would have ever expected. Then they asked them, okay, how about if everyone else in your school or in your social group was getting off social media? Then how much would you need to get paid? And they said nothing. I would get off immediately. If everyone else opted out, I would be out in a second, which to me is just like really disturbing that if given the option to get off, the kids all wanted to get off, but they didn't feel like they could because of the disconnection and social ostracism of not being on there. It felt really like dark and upsetting to me. So the good news is we can change that as parents. We can change that in our communities. And I'm bringing this up again, just to continue to raise awareness, because I really believe that this is a choice that we have. I don't think this is like a foregone conclusion. This is a way easier solution, for example, than like what's going on with our relationship to nature and ecology, right? Like that's far more complicated. This one is like a pretty clear, like, okay, let's form community agreements where our kids are not having phones until high school and then not on social media until at least the age of 16, if not older. And so that to me is like really, really straightforward. So my commitment, just in our house, folks may or may not care about this, but in our house, our kids do not have any screens of their own. They're allowed to use an iPad every now and again to FaceTime their grandparents or to play Spotify Kids music. I make them put it on airplane mode after they've made their playlist. And also occasionally they'll do like one of those guided drawing exercises on YouTube or watch like a craft tutorial. So that's like kind of the extent of their screen time. And then on the weekends, we usually will watch a family movie and they watch a show after quiet time. So that's like basically what we do screen time wise. I have found like there have been times when screens have gone more into the middle of the week, like TV shows and stuff. And my parenting style is I do really great with straightforward, clear boundaries. And I think my kids do too, where it's like, we just don't watch TV during the week. We're just not on screens during the week. And that way it's only on the weekends. And I don't have to be like in a constant fight with them of like, can I watch a show? No, you can't. Can I watch a show? But you let me yesterday. No. So we're just hard and fast about that. It works really well for us. And so that's what's happening there behind the scenes. And I cannot imagine giving my children phones anytime soon. Like there's literally no reason to do that. They're with us, they're at school. There's like no need for them to be on there and have that whole world open to them. But I was really shocked to hear that the average age that people give their kids phones is 10 years old, which is like really soon. I just know that in terms of early childhood development and even mid-child development, it's really important for our kids to be bored. It's really important for them to be in their creativity. It's really important to be in their imaginations. And listen, as a parent, like I get how much easier it would be to just hand them an iPad. I get how much easier it would be to just hand them a phone. But it's one of my pursuits as a mother to continue to learn to regulate my own nervous system enough to be with a kid who's whining that they're bored, to sit with the discomfort of them bugging me as much as I want to drug them with a screen so that I can have like quiet time for myself. I just am like, I can deal with the crying about it. I can deal with the discomfort around it. I can deal with their discomfort because my job as a mother is not to make my children comfortable. My job as a mother is not to appease them and have them avoid boredom or the feeling of being left out, or right, like my job as a mother is to keep them safe and also to support their optimal development. And one of the ways that I do that is just by, avoiding having them on screens to some degree, not 100%. So in terms of solutions, Jonathan Haight has like his straightforward, clear things. One of them is really bringing more unsupervised outdoor play into childhood. We live in Miami, so like sending my kids just out to play at a park alone is really not safe. But it's something I think about a lot, and it's a desire I have. I grew up playing in the woods. Like we would go out for hours at a time and not come home. There was a time when we had a nanny who my sister and I were both scared of, so we didn't even come home to go to the bathroom. We would just go pee in the woods and we would be gone for hours, and that was that. It was a different time. It was the 80s, but I also think about like my kids aren't having that experience of healthy, safe risk and being able to mitigate their own system around like what is safe and what is not. Like there's always kind of that parent involved to be the arbiter of what is safe and what is not. And that is a detriment to their development. So something I'm thinking about, like how can I bring in unsupervised play in nature more? Also for sure, no phone until high school. I mean, if my kid needed to get like a flip phone or something to be able to keep in touch if they were like doing some kind of activity, I might consider that, but I can't really imagine a scenario where that would need to be the case. And then absolutely no social media until middle of high school, if ever. Who knows? The other day, Penelope asked me when she was going to get her own phone, and I said she was going to be at least 25. So, that's obviously not true. But I think it's a really important issue, and I am really wanting to rally people to get together with their communities and read the article in The Atlantic together, perhaps read The Anxious Generation together, and really have community agreements. Because when everyone in a community shifts their approach, it's really easy for everyone. Like, for example, I mean, this is kind of a silly example, but it illustrates it. We went away for a week with my best friend, Sarah Jenks, and her family and her kids and her husband and my kids and my husband. And Sarah and I got on the phone ahead of time to talk through screen time, bedtime, and sugar. Because we were just like, it's going to be so much easier if we have made agreements ahead of time about screen time, bedtime, and sugar for this week of vacation. We're going to be on the same page. We're not going to be having this push-pull of like, oh God, Sarah said her kids could do this, but Kate said hers couldn't. And now Kate's giving Sarah's kids dessert before dinner, but they don't do that at their house. We just got on the same page because in community, if we have shared agreements, it just makes everyone's life easier because you're not doing that like constant pull with your kids of like, but Sally has a phone, but I'm the only one who doesn't. But now I'm missing out on every single thing that's happening in the social fabric of middle school or high school because I'm the only one on social media, right? Like we don't want our child to be left out. We don't want our child to have a deep sense of a lack of belonging. We don't want them to not be connected to the social fabric of their community. One of the most important aspects of our well-being as humans is positive social connection. But social media specifically and phones like as a larger category the data does not show us that they actually create positive, meaningful social connection that improves our mental health. What the data shows is that those forms of connecting actually decrease our mental health. And yet our children are feeling, it's like worse than pressure. It's like they're feeling like they are feeling trapped. They're feeling like they don't have the option to leave, even when they're aware that it's terrible for them. And I just want to change that. And so who knows what the future will hold? I'm so glad that this conversation is more in the public eye right now. It's really important to me. Jonathan Haight has been on a million different podcasts, so go check it out. Go listen. One of them was on Barry Weiss's podcast. We'll link that in the show notes. That was a great one. But go do your research, rally up, talk to your friends about it, talk to the parents you're raising kids in community with. And I would love to see all over the country, all over the world, more and more communities and schools who are signing literal agreements and pledges to say, I will not give my child a phone until high school, and I will not have them on social media until X date. And then if everyone agrees, this problem will slowly, and maybe not even so slowly, go away. I've heard so many stories of parents sharing that their kid, they lost their kid, whether it was to severe anorexia, severe anxiety, severe depression. And then after a week or two without a phone, they're like, oh, all of a sudden my child is back. It could be fast and dramatic that we could shift the culture, that we could shift this tide. And so that's my invitation. And certainly if you live in a wonderful area that already has a school and agreements like this, especially if it's an elementary school, send me a DM, send me an email. I'd love to hear about it. I know that Waldorf schools all already have this agreement in place. It's a tech-free space. I love that. I support that. I'm not 100% sure that Waldorf is right for our family, but who knows? That's what I've got for you today. I hope that this episode was hopeful for you in terms of what we can do to shift culture and keep our children connected to source with a capital S, connected to their personal power through their own healthy brain and nervous system development. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time on Plenty. Thanks for listening to this episode of Plenty. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. That's one of the best ways that you can ensure to spread the abundance of plenty with others. You can even text it to a friend and tell them to listen in. And if you want even more support to expand your abundance, head over to katenorthrup.com/breakthroughs, where you can grab my free money breakthrough guide that details the biggest money breakthroughs from some of the top earning women I know, plus a mini lesson accompanying it with my own biggest money breakthroughs and a nervous system healing tool for you to expand your abundance. Again, that's over at katenorthrup.com/breakthroughs. See you next time.